How do socialist countries like North Korea stay afloat for decades despite having incredibly inefficient economic systems? Let's get into it. The North Korean government officially announced that they were a socialist economy in 1958. Shortly after that, in the 70s, their economy separated from the South Korean economy in terms of GDP per capita. The South Koreans were now richer. And things did not get better for the North Koreans from there, especially in the 90s with the collapse of the Soviet Union and them losing all the Soviet Union's aid and their trade. North Korea experienced a terrible famine in the 90s, and at this point, they had to address their problems. In October of 2001, the North Korean government started talking about what they were going to do about their economic situation, without actually addressing the fact they screwed up big time. The next year, they admitted to the party cadres that they were bankrupt, but they did not tell the public this yet. In July of that year, they implemented the Economic Management Improvement Measures. This was a sort of reforming of the economy, although they didn't call them reforms. They cut out a lot of subsidies and slightly loosened their control on the economy. They started to allow factories to sell their products on an open market and kind of brought back money as opposed to just having absolute government allocation. After this, a lot of people started selling goods on a market, and many started making livings off of this. In some cases, they were just producing things at home, and in some cases, they were actually selling things from old factories. Some people would even steal from their work. They worked for the state, and then sell the things they stole at markets. And this started to dramatically change the North Korean economy. The authors of The Hidden People of North Korea describe this as changing from a struggling socialist command economy to an emerging proto-market economy. Historian Andrei Lankoff reports that the share of income from the informal economic activities, so these markets and various private businesses, reached 78% of the total income of North Korean households. So an emerging private market became dominant. He reports that a lot of farmers wanted to grow their own food, but the government was not privatizing the agriculture like they did in China. Instead, the farmers would just grow away from the bureaucrats out in the countryside where nobody would find them, although we can see them on satellite images. The restaurant industry collapsed in the 90s, and from that emerged a private restaurant industry. Basically, how this works is you have state-owned restaurants, and then private investors come in and pay off the bureaucrats, and they run the business themselves and keep profits. A 2009 study estimated that 58.5% of all restaurants were de facto privately owned. So they were owned by the state on paper, but they were being privately managed. We've actually seen this in the reverse order in many countries, like National Socialist Germany. This de facto private ownership is exactly why North Korea hasn't completely collapsed. This is how people are able to feed themselves. This is how people are able to make income. You see the same thing with virtually all socialist countries. Cuba has a massive black market. The Soviet Union had a massive black market. The only way for these countries to survive is to have these little hidden private markets that are operating like capitalism. If they completely got rid of these markets, these de facto privately owned businesses, these private land plots, they would starve their people. Their society would completely collapse. That is what a pure socialist economy would look like.